It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here, singing a solo. No Barnett Bain. He is out this week. Oh, I miss him. I miss him already. But you get me. And today I'm thrilled because we have a friend of the show. I mean, he's a new friend of the show. We're going to be talking today to Miguel Ruiz Jr., whose father, of course, Don Miguel Ruiz, is a friend of the show, and we've had on several times, a personal friend. And it's going to be great to talk to Miguel Jr. because he has a beautiful new book that just came out, or that's coming out, forgive me, about 5 levels of attachment. So welcome to the show, Miguel.
Good morning, Ms. Freeman. How are you?
Good, buddy. So I love your book.
Oh, thank you.
It's really beautifully written.
Oh, thank you. It's put a lot of love to it.
Yeah, no kidding. So, we have periodically had conversations with people who grew up around this material. It's fairly rare. You're an exception. I'm thinking specifically, we had Barnett's daughter at one point come in, and she's in her 20s. And one of the things I marveled at was, what does it look like to grow up with this material? Because for me, and for most people that have come to the wisdom teachings and this consciousness kind of material, it's a paradigm shift, right? And so, I guess what fires me up is the concept that my children, your children, and even you in some way, are growing up with what I'm going to call a new normal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
So, because this is not something that you had to look very far. I mean, I know from reading your book that it wasn't something you were always inclined to follow, but your grandmother, your father, you were around this as a kind of normal, this material about a deeper perspective on being human, a worldview that is, significantly different than how most people's worldview is. And I'm curious from your perspective. Now, again, I know the backstory is at one point in time you were, I don't know if the language is rejecting all of the kind of teachings of your father and your grandfather, and really going along with the storyline, the dream, if you will, the planetary dream, the collective dream, that rocks are hard and water is wet, and this sort of crunched down, version of reality, but that it was this other option, this other way of viewing things was always around you. And I'm curious from your perspective, how it is, especially as a father, because I'm a father of children, and I talk in these terms to my kids, knowing that it's kind of different than how maybe their friends' parents talk or whatever. I'm curious from your perspective, what does it look like to have the option to view life from a different vantage point?
Well, it's a strange juxtaposition. My father was always my father. He raised us. He was disciplined us when we were out of line, and by the same time loved us exactly for who we were. It was, you can say that in my family, it wasn't just my father, but it was also my grandmother, the spiritual head of the family. So at home, you can say that belief system, or philosophy, if you will, really is part of a family. We speak in that way, we engage each other in that way. But when I go to school, it was a totally different experience. It's academic and social life and all things. So it was basically how to juggle both of them. So at certain degrees, how we engage on it is different. Because I've gotten the question before, how's it like to grow up with my father? And to me, it was just simply, it's normal. That's my normal.
Right.
And to me, everyone else was exotic. The discipline or the way people handle their life was incredible, where we had to learn our way, not just with a very flexible guideline of life, because the rules were somewhat flexible, most because the way my father and my grandmother taught us was, all right, experience life, and life will teach you the mistakes, life will teach you your successes, and we're here to guide you through it. We're basically here to throw you into the pool and be ready to jump in if you need our help. But the first thing we want you to do is to have that sense of security.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that interesting combination where at school you're driving for that A, you're driving for that to be cool, you're driving for the attention of people, you're driving for that things of pop culture or whatever it is that the neighborhood or my school would be into, and then you come home and none of that existed.
Yeah,
none of that drive, none of that push. So it was a wonderful thing because in that kind of thing, it's like I can speak with my family's tradition at home, and everyone would be able to interact. And outside, it'd be a total different language.
Yeah.
And growing up, balancing the two was interesting. And of course, I rebelled against my family for a while, not because I didn't love what they did. I enjoyed it, but I wanted to do something for myself and finding my own identity. You know, for example, the book, The Four Agreements, came out in 1997, and I didn't really read it till 2002 or 3.
I love that.
The reason why is because when I read the book, it's my dad talking to me. And
right.
my son hearing his father, it's like, well, he's telling me what to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. You know, it's so interesting because the idea, and this is, by the way, represented in your book really beautifully, of developing your own identity and sort of making sense of the wisdom teaching because, you know, it's developmentally appropriate when you're a little kid to, you know, want a G.I. Joe or a PlayStation or this or that and to conform to, you know, the collective trance, if you will, that's so fixated on certain kinds of outcomes and whatever. And it's hard to know where the teachings, these wisdom teachings, fit, right? It's an issue of values. But clearly there was a point in time where a shift occurred. And I want to kind of lead you down a certain path with that. I love the language that, the perspective, I should say, that life will teach you. And I like it in the book in terms of how knowledge is treated. So in your book, what you say about knowledge, which is the what you know, right? This is the what you know. There's a reverence within your family of origin, within the wisdom teaching, for what you don't know, right? So the mystery. So there's again, in the traditional, that's the wrong language, in the societal culture, you know, there's so much emphasis on learning so that you know something, because then that'll give you an identity, which is something you talk about in the book, right? You identify with what you know. And you were constantly being sort of told, yes, that's great, son. In fact, you can quote your grandmother probably better than I can, but there's this other thing that's more important. In fact, if you don't mind, and as long as it's on the tip of your tongue, maybe you have to paraphrase, but that precise thing your grandma said about knowledge and that reverence for the unfolding and the learning and the growing. Do you have that one on the tip of your tongue?
Oh yeah, it's basically the question that drives the book, which is, do you control knowledge or does knowledge control you?
Yeah.
Because in essence, if knowledge controls you, then you're always translating the world. You perceive life, but instead of perceiving life, you're listening to your mind, process it, judge it, basically just process it to the point where it's almost recognizable.
Right, you're talking about filtering. So what we're doing is we're actually bending and twisting and perceiving even in a way that conforms to a belief structure, and that's even the language you use in the book. So we're forming everything to fit what we know versus having this capacity, having this awareness that there's something beyond what I presently know, something just outside of my frame of reference that is worth pursuing. Yeah,
and that's how we use knowledge. When we use knowledge, knowledge allows us the instruction or the go to understand the world. But from using knowledge as the instrument that allows me to navigate through the unknown, it allows me to actually perceive the world. You can say that as I go on the frontier of my knowing, and I go and experience life as it is. For example, before I had kids, I had no idea what it is to be a father. And when I held my son in my hand for the first time, I realized I had no idea what I did. And I'm realizing that my parents have been doing that since I was born. No parent really knows what they're doing. We're playing it by ear.
Right.
But we grab the information from the resources. We grab it from our memory of our parents. We grab it from what our uncles and our aunts tell us and from the books. And we grab all this information and we apply it as it is functional. Because some information is not going to work because my son and my daughter are unique individuals. What worked for someone else won't work for my son, and what works for my son won't work for my little girl, which means I'm playing it by ear. I'm engaging life, and life is telling me what I need. And from there, I can use my knowledge as the instrument to engage it, but at the same time, life is teaching me even more.
Right. So it's an issue really of where you get your information. That again, if we're tracking back to and on this show we use language, we call it the reservation, and so we're always tracking back to the reservation for instruction in terms of how to do things. There's limitation in that. We live within a certain construct, and everything has to fit that construct, and it's limited. But if we recognize that there are resources, or there's a source, let's say, beyond the construct, and even if it's just a faint sense of that, the opportunity in sourcing and getting the information from that expands. And at some point, maybe even we're off the reservation. We're not playing by the same rules. That's clearly the mystery tradition.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is that regardless, basically in what we know, we can be completely attached to it, that won't let us see that potential. We won't see what's that beyond. We were so attached to it, it'll basically narrow our perception. Our awareness can, like a flower, when we're detached and we're able to see the life as is, awareness opens up like a flower, and as we get so attached, it closes, which narrows our perception, or you can say narrows our mind.
Wow.
So in our essence, life is infinite, has infinite lessons for us to learn from. When we attach ourselves to what we know and we identify ourselves with what we know, that perception of what life has to give us narrows to the point where we really think we only have one choice and life is only one thing. But in reality, it's beyond our imagination. The beauty that life, God, and everything has created is beyond the imagination even of my own perception.
I love that.
Because I can perceive 350 degrees around me, and I can let go to detach just simply to perceive everything around me. And of course, if I attach myself and I forget that I have the choice to detach because I've invested so much of myself in that, then it really is a fearful thing to let go, because in having that attachment, basing our identity in that attachment, it makes us feel secure. Because sometimes not knowing brings fear, because we're comfortable with what we know.
That's it. All right, so listen, I want to switch gears for a second, because there's a part of this book that I have to confess worked me a little bit. I mean, lots of the book worked me because it's, a sincerely, a beautifully, beautifully written book. And I love the length, by the way. It's 150 some odd pages, but it's just perfect. It's such a great read. I sat down and read it in essentially one sitting because I was really enjoying it, and I just kept flipping pages and going, this is great. The part that grabbed me was the football analogy. Now, you were talking in this case about soccer, but for me, literally football. Though you do talk about you're a Chargers fan, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I grew up in San Francisco, which is so germane right now because, of course, San Francisco's in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And I was, it's so interesting because I read this, of course, right around the time of that game where the championship game where the 49ers beat the Atlanta Falcons to get into the Super Bowl.
It was a good game, by the way.
It was a good game. We get to enjoy the game to the degree that we have dominion over attachment. So I was very aware at some point during that game that I wasn't breathing. I was very aware that I was identified with a certain outcome. And I know from past experience that, what you talk about in the book, which is the aftermath when you're really You go all the way to fanaticism, where you're really identified with what happens, and afterwards, if your team or my team in this case loses, I'm irritable or depressed for maybe days. I mean, it's really gripping this trance, if you will, and so I love this football analogy because it was such a brilliant way, sincerely brilliant way to illustrate the 5 levels of attachment. So let's talk a little bit about just the 5 levels and generally how they work, because it's a really, really great distinction.
Mm-hmm. Well, the 5 levels are the authentic self, level 1, preference, level 2, identity at level 3, internalization, level 4, and level 5 is fanaticism. If we use the image of the soccer game, once again, you can say that at level 1, we can go to any stadium in the world and we're just engaging for 60 minutes or 90 minutes and enjoying a game, but when the game ends, it doesn't say anything about who and what I am. I walk up and I enjoyed the game, but I'm free to live life and engage life. At level 2, I have a preference of where I want to put my attention, which team, which story. But at the end of the game, I'm always able to disengage at the highs or lows, regardless of whether the team I was rooting for wins. And mind you, I wasn't rooting against the other team, but I simply enjoy it. At level 3, I identify myself by the name of that team. I am a Barcelona fan, I'm a Chargers fan, I'm a Niners fan. And win or lose, the outcome is going to dictate my sense of self, my happiness, my enjoyment outside of those 90 minutes. Basically, outside of that moment, it affects me, and I begin to a process. Now, at level 3, it is not my condition to enjoy life based as a 49er fan or Chargers fan or Barcelona fan. I simply call myself because that's what I like. At level 4, I will use that information to domesticate myself. I have to be a good Barcelona fan. I have to be a good Charger fan or a Niners fan. And if we lose, if we win, yeah. But and unlike on level 3, where we would just enjoy the win or suffer the loss, at level 4, we're chastising others, we're judging others, or we're celebrating, saying, ha, we're better than you, or I'm better than you. And at level 5, the game, the team, they could be playing football or soccer, it doesn't matter. The team is me. You can say throughout each level, you can say that there's a clear separation between what happens on the field and me, the viewer. At level 1, there's a clear separation, as well as level 2. But at level 3, the line between what happens on the field and me begins to blur, and I see myself as that 12th man. At level 4, basically, those players represent me. If they win, then I win. If they lose, then I lose. And at level 5, they better win, because if they lose, well, of course, it's the ref's fault, of course.
Right, there's somebody to blame.
Because we're not going to accept the loss, and we're going to try to domesticate everyone else to feel that.
Right. So at level 5, which is at the level of fanaticism, I mean, we think of this, of course, in terms of religious fanatics, who it's an us or them mentality. You're either saved or you're not saved, or you're either, one of us or you're against us. And it becomes a very hostile world to live in at that level. But I mean, all of this I love the dimensions of it, because you can see it. You can see where, any one of us, and I've been doing this kind of work for roughly 20 years. And, again, what gripped me about the football analogy is it's one of my blind spots. It's one of those areas where I really can see where my attachment to my team and my team's winning has an effect. And again, as I was watching that championship game, I found myself breathing, and I found myself consciously going, wow, where's my attachment? So there was an opportunity, based on the perspective you shared in that book, to really view myself in a really constructive way. So I love the offer of that, because, when we get caught in fanaticism, there's an enemy. Mm-hmm. And
of course, clear.
Yeah.
And we need the enemy to define who we are. If we're not righteous, then of course we need someone that's not righteous, and we will fight them.
Yeah.
You can say that, with the using of sports is the way that I understood it. That was a reflection of me. And with religion, you can say at level 5, God just happens to be the thing the religion prays to, but the religion is more important than God. At level 1, you can find love, you can find the grace of God in every single religion, including a drum circle or even a circle of prayer. You will always find God, regardless of religion or tradition.
Yeah, at the fanatic level, my God can kick your God's ass.
Yeah, exactly.
My God's better than yours.
Yeah, and which is an attachment to the religion, not necessarily God.
Right, and of course we all laugh at that because it's so preposterous. Like, God is love. So, degrees of love, characteristics of love, who cares? Call it anything you want. It's either in that vibratory frequency or it's not. So again, what's brilliant about the book is that it's such a beautiful illustration of something that I don't think is linear. In other words, personally, I feel as if, I talk personally in terms of parts of me. And there are parts of me that are less developed than other parts of me. And in various situations, let's say at a football game, the operating aspect of me may not be the most developed. So my work personally, and I think this is actually, sort of the point of the book, is to care for the part of me that does get attached, that goes there. Again, what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show is there's an aspect of it that's developmental. In other words, there's a less developed part of me that I want to be able to, hold and care for and not, and I don't want to, just cut it off or get rid of it. I want to integrate it in a way so that I can be with that part of me constructively, but not allow it to drive the bus, as it were. Right?
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's basically a reference of where I'm at this very moment. If I'm attached at level 2 or level 4 or level 5, it's the truth where I am right now. And at that moment, this is who I am. For me, what is important to detach from is not necessarily a concept or an idea, but the agreements that we've made that give us conditional love. If we look ourselves in the mirror and we see all these things, if they say, I'm too fat, I'm balding, whatever self-judgments, all those self-judgments we hear from ourselves, from our mind, is basically the agreements we've said that, yes, in order to accept myself, I have to look this way. And all those judgments are punishing ourselves. Each one of those judgments is an attachment that we have a choice of letting go.
That's beautiful. Because we are fundamentally, and you make this point repeatedly in the book, we are fundamentally perfect, complete with all of our imperfections.
Yeah, because we're alive. We're perfect simply because we're alive.
Well, and of course, in all the spiritual traditions, the birthright element, where that we're a precious child of God, with whom He's well pleased. That there isn't anything that love doesn't require us. Love on the unconditional level. And again, you make this point in the book. Doesn't require us to do anything. It is ours, no matter what, at any given time. And so that, again, is the remembering, the putting back together the truth. And I love how well that's illustrated in this book, that that's the fundamental truth, and anything else is a distortion. Miguel, I want you to let our listeners know, I believe the book's coming out in March, but I don't want to misquote it. So can you tell us what the actual release date of the book is?
It's actually Friday, March 1st, and it's going to be available through all your bookstores, local independent stores. It's going to be available through audio, and right now it's actually going to be translated into Spanish, French, and I think German or Bulgarian. But the cool thing for me is that after working all these 4 years, I get to see it. And
that's so great. It's so great. And I'm so thrilled that you're publishing it with Randy Davila, our dear friend of this show. He's such a fantastic guy. Yeah. And I'm thrilled that you have the support of your father, obviously the support of Janet Mills, who I understand helped you. And she's such a fantastic resource. And all of those resources. Let's give folks, before we let you go, the website so that they can stay in touch with you and all the things you're doing, places you're going to be appearing, and so forth.
Yeah, it's Miguel Ruiz Jr. .com, and also go Miguel Ruiz.com. There's two websites. Well, the difference is the Junior.
Okay, great. So all of this will be available on the Cutting Edge Consciousness website as well. Miguel, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you so much, Freeman, for your time, and thank you so much, and good luck on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, no kidding. And for those of you listening, stay tuned, because we'll be right back after these messages.